Good morning and welcome to EBFA History Channel. My name is April Cartwright and our topic today is why the South lost the American Civil War. Here's some background information that you might need to know about the Civil War. The Civil War began in 1861 after the attack on Fort Sumter. The war ended on April 9, 1865 when General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. Today we have some special guests that will be taking us into a deeper dive into our topic. Now we're going to welcome Dr. Ellis.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Hi, my name is Dr. Ellis and I'm a historian at Boston University.
Since you know all about the Civil War, can you tell us about how the North had an advantage of resources?
Of course. The North had a much bigger population, which helped them build a larger army and replace soldiers when they needed to. They also had most of the country's factories, so they could make more weapons, uniforms, and supplies than the South could. This gave the Union a huge advantage throughout the war. The North also had a strong railroad system. This made it easier for them to move troops and supplies quickly, while the South often struggled to transport what they needed. Another major factor was a Union blockade. By blocking southern ports, the North stopped the South from trading cotton with England and France. Over time, those countries started relying more on the North, which weakened the South even more. All these things, more people, more supplies, better transportation, and the blockade made the Union much stronger. The South couldn't keep up, and this played a big part in why they lost the war. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to April.
Thank you. Now we're going to welcome Professor Long.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me today. I'm Professor Locke and I teach civics at Columbia University.
So you say you're an expert on the Civil War?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about the political beliefs of the Civil War?
Yes, so as you may know, the American Civil War is a war between the northern states and the southern states. Previously, there had been lots of tension between these states, but when Abraham Lincoln came into office on March 4th, 1861, things changed. The southern states became known as the Confederacy, and they left the Union, known today as the United States of America. A ship later carried supplies that were heading towards Fort Sumter, which is a military base located in South Carolina, and the resupply was ordered by President Lincoln. This was initially why the Civil War began, but when President Lincoln gave an executive order called the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, the reason for the war had then changed. The Emancipation Proclamation was used as a way to weaken Southern forces, and it worked, and now the war was about slavery.
Thank you. Now we're going to welcome Margaret Finkelstein.
Hi, April.
Hi, Margaret.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, I'm Margaret Finkelstein, and I'm an American War History teacher at Harvard University. I also spent 10 years in the archaeology business and have studied a lot about the Civil War.
Because you've taught a lot about the Civil War, can you teach us about the moral idea of slavery?
Yeah, of course. So in 1862, September 22nd, Lincoln gave his speech, the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation was less about keeping the country together and more about slavery. This was the speech that had a big part in the involvement of the French and English in the war. This speech caused the war to become a moral issue about slavery. France and England had already abolished slavery, so they were against it. But before the Emancipation Proclamation, the war was not officially about slavery. It was about keeping the Union together and whether that was unconstitutional. Meaning that after the Emancipation Proclamation, the French and the English had the right to intervene. This meant the war turned into a question of right or wrong. The decision of whether it was right for the country to have slaves was a question that now seems easy, but then was a life or death situation. Today we think of the Emancipation Proclamation as the end to slavery, but that was not the case. The Emancipation Proclamation only helped pass the proclamation that slaves were not allowed in rebelling states, shown here on this map. Even though the war started off as a war about whether to stay Union, after the Emancipation Proclamation, it became a decision of right and wrong. This caused England and France to support the North and lead them to victory. Thank you so much for having me.
One last question for our special guest. Come on in. Why did the South lose the American Civil War?
Ultimately, the Confederate States lost the Civil War because of the North's advantage of resources and the South's political beliefs that drove the country apart and the moral idea of slavery itself.
Thanks for watching the EBFA History Channel. We'll see you next time.